Hello, everyone. Welcome to Healing the Spirit. I am here today with some listener questions. These questions are specifically submitted by some of my Substack subscribers, and they're really brilliant, I think. So, some of you may know that starting March 2nd, I am going to be facilitating a Venus and Mars immersion. And let me see if there's something I want to say about the immersion before I start answering these questions. When I first started learning astrology, I had this experience of being really amazed by astrology, by my birth chart. It was as if this static graph, the static chart is reflecting back to me aspects of my own experience that maybe I wasn't even fully aware of. So I remember just being completely mesmerized in the beginning. And then as I deepened into my astrology studies, I felt like I wanted to go deeper, specifically in terms of, okay, here are the insights that I received from my birth chart. Here are the knowledge or sometimes even it feels like the birth chart is a map, right? It tells us these are the qualities that you're here to embody, and these are the tendencies that you have. These are the challenges that you might be facing. And so try this, right? And I felt like I was kind of lost in terms of how I could put all of that into practice. Like, here's all this information that I was getting from my birth chart, but I wasn't fully clear about how I could then start to implement that into my own life. How can I start applying these insights, these kind of transformative understanding into everyday situation? How could I find work that is actually more interesting to me? How could I communicate better in my relationships? How do I go after the things I want? And so when I was thinking about creating this Venus and Mars immersion, my primary intention is to create a space where we not only learn about these archetypes as concepts or as pieces of information so that we can put more into our analytical brain, but I wanted to create a space where we can fuse astrology and other modalities like energy work that I'm very well versed in and that I found to be really helpful in terms of creating transformation in my own life, right? And I wanted to create a space where the two of them can coexist, where we can study archetypes, but we can also then put that into practice, right? We can bring the things that we are struggling with, the things in our lives that we wish were different, and we can kind of investigate it. We can take a look at it together and see how the study of archetypes can actually help us. And also in real time, what I wanted to do was to assist people in actually changing their lives, right? Changing is very challenging. Making changes is so tough, right? Because there's just something about being human and perhaps the survival mechanisms and impulses that we've that honestly have been helpful for us, right? For generations and generations. These are the things that have helped us to be here, essentially. But when it comes to creating changes that can hopefully make our lives feel more like our own, where we can feel like we're actually walking our own path instead of the path that we've been prescribed, right? The path is not always very straightforward. That process can be very challenging. And I found through years of giving readings that while readings can be such a powerful kind of peak experience, real transformation can take time. And so I wanted to, yeah, really create space where not only if you're interested, you can hang out with me for an extended period of time and work on areas of your life that you want to work on and areas of your chart that you want to have a better relationship with, but also to be in community with like-minded people, people who are on their spiritual path, people who are creative, and there we can create an atmosphere of supporting one another in our personal journey through learning astrology, learning energy work, and in general, just kind of asking ourselves the questions, right? Exploring different facets of being alive. So if this sounds interesting to you, I would love to have you, and you can read more about the immersion on the course page. And yeah, let me see if there's anything I want to say about that. I don't think so. That's it. If you have any questions, you can always find me. You know where to find me. Substack, Instagram, my email, and all that. Okay, let us get to the brilliant questions that have been submitted. So, when I ask my Substack subscribers for questions, here was my prompt. I would love to solicit some questions from you. What are some challenges you're seeing or facing in 2026 so far when it comes to showing up authentically in work and relationships? Feel free to include your Venus and Mars placements by sign and house if you want. So, my intention is really to provide some of my thoughts, right? Really, I'm just offering perspectives here. So, be discerning. For those of you who ask the questions, feel into which ones feel useful for you at the moment, which ones feel medicinal, which ones may be asking you to step up to the challenge, and which ones I am completely off base about, right? Because that's very possible because I really only got your question, and I didn't probe for more information. And some of the questions are very general. So I'm going to speak to the more general questions generally. And for those of you listening who didn't have these questions, who didn't ask these questions, I imagine that some of you might find it relevant and helpful for your own life. And these questions, I have kind of calibrated them to Venus and Mars as well. So these are kind of in the context of Venus and Mars, right? So the first question is, hi, Jonathan. For me, it is to be open to dating again now that I am my true and authentic self. Thank you. Okay, first of all, very exciting. I'm so excited for you, and congratulations for working on yourself, for putting yourself out there again. Here are a few things that I want to encourage you to think about. The first one is there a gap or space between your true and authentic self versus who you are or how you are when you are going on dates? And if so, noticing what are the stories there, right? Why is there a gap? Why is there uh maybe fear or nervousness for showing up fully as you are when you are meeting a new person? So I'm now reading between the lines here, but I'm imagining that part of what's behind your question is also that perhaps you've had past experiences where you're looking back at them from the perspective of who you are now, and perhaps you are aware that there's a gap. The last time you were putting yourself out there, going on dates, perhaps there was a gap in terms of how you show up and who you know yourself to be inside. And perhaps you were also seeing that the results weren't exactly what you wanted because you were not fully, yeah, you weren't fully honest maybe with yourself and with other people. And so I just want to remind you as you're opening to this new chapter that the past is really just a story. We live in a culture where we are so used to being bound by the illusion of time. There is a very subtle, it goes all the way from subtle to really obvious messaging about how our past is the best predictor for our future, right? And I think to a certain extent that can be true, especially when we don't look at our patterns and they continue to perpetuate. But this is not because the past is a good predictor for the future, right? The truth is that life is always renewing itself. Here's an internet analogy that I would like to share. Instead of thinking of life as the static website, like for example, right? Macy's website is pretty static. So if I go today versus like 3 days from now, chances are the website is pretty much the same, right? I can navigate through it. I can find what I need to find. But life isn't actually like that. Life is more like a social media feed, right? Every time you go into if you, every time you look at life, it's actually refreshed every single time. So that leads me to my second point that I want you to contemplate, which is there an idea that your true and authentic self needs to be maintained or managed somehow? This is something that I see a lot with people who have done their inner work, especially if they've done so in a very diligent and devoted way, which my sense is just based on your question, you are one of these people who are really committed to showing up authentically. And one of the things we can struggle with is thinking that our authentic self is this static image that we have to maintain, right? That's not true because your authentic self is always updating itself. It's not static. So the practice of continuing to show up authentically means that you are also simultaneously having to release attachments to outcome. The moment you attach yourself to an outcome that you think you want, you lose touch with that pulse of authenticity and it starts to become a performance, right? It is simply too challenging. We simply don't really have the energy that's required a lot of the times to be so attached to an outcome and then still be able to respond authentically. A lot of the times I found that this is actually kind of a mutually exclusive somehow. So in a way, the reason why I'm bringing all that up is I also want you to go into this chapter recognizing that as you walk into this new chapter of letting yourself date again, you will meet new parts of yourself. And the reason for this, there's a myriad reasons why this is, right? Because whenever we put ourselves out there and we meet new people will always reflect back to us aspects of ourselves that we're not fully aware of. So you will look back 3 months from now, 6 months from now, at who you are today, and you will see that you are continuing your process of committing to your authentic expression through dating. And dating will show you, it will challenge you, sometimes in delightful ways, sometimes in difficult ways, and other times in neutral but surprising ways. It will show you places within yourself where you can be more honest with yourself, right? Places within yourself where you can be more coherent in how you communicate with others while still maintaining your own connection to yourself. And this is a constant practice, right? And because you are always evolving as a being, just know that you don't need to hold up any sort of fixed idea of what it means to be true and authentic. Being committed to your own truth and being committed to expressing yourself authentically is a moment by moment choice that you are making. Every interaction is an opportunity to choose to share your immediate responses or spontaneous responses, or to choose a different path, right? And sometimes when we're choosing a different path, it's it's not to say that if we're not being totally spontaneous, we're not being authentic either. This is why a lot of the times people can lose their own sense of who they are authentically in relationships. Because the truth is, when you go into situations like going on a date or being in a relationship with another person, you are co-creating a third thing, right? It's not just your energy or this person's energy, but it's like a third energy. And so just know that you will be evolved by this experience. This experience will evolve you. And I would say just enjoy the ride. Enjoy seeing how you get shifted by relationships and by relating to other people. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about it. I wish you the most beautiful and enchanted experience in this next chapter of going on dates. Okay. The second question is, I feel like I am satisfied, but my audience is not. Okay, so for context, I know this person, and this person um, is a brilliant practitioner, has a beautiful public work out there, right? And so this question or this comment is within the context of building your practice, right? You feel like you enjoy what you're putting out there, but maybe your audience isn't responding the way you think or you want them to respond. Um, and you also added that you don't know that for sure, right? And um, this is an experience I know very well because, for example, having a podcast, I don't always get a response from all of you. Sometimes I put out an episode that I think is, you know, blew my socks off, and then who knows? Nobody commented, nobody shared it, right? And that's really part of sharing on the internet, I think, because you could put out the best thing, and sometimes maybe the people who are tuning into you are a little bit tired, or maybe, I don't know. First, there's many different reasons, right? Why people are not responding. We don't fully know. So this person in their chart has Venus in Sagittarius in the 10th house and Mars in Scorpio in the ninth house. So immediately upon looking at this person's chart, here is what I heard. Lean into the teacher that you are. I think this is very exciting. And I'm thinking specifically about someone who has Mars, right? The planet of action, of vitality in the ninth house, of teaching, of expanding one's own and other people's perspectives in the sign of Scorpio, right? So this is, uh, if I'm only looking at your birth chart, this is someone who's really meant to go deep, right? Who's meant to go to the places that it might hurt a little bit. It might be a little bit ouchy, but therein lies the medicine, right? So here are some questions you can play with. What do you think people are not doing correctly, much to their own detriment? Are there misconceptions that people have, misunderstandings about life that people perpetuate in their own reality that you observe is hurting them? And perhaps to even bring this into your embodied experience, where have you perhaps missed out on opportunities for connection, for pleasure, for joy, for satisfaction, because you yourself have denied your own impulses, right? So there are two kind of separate strands here that I'm speaking to. One is a more corrective aspect of Scorpio, right? Scorpio can look at a situation or look at a person and almost have this X-ray vision and know that, oh, this person is not doing this correctly. Where is that happening? And then the second part of this is where have you yourself not allowed yourself to go deep in your own life because you're maybe a little bit scared and you time passes by and you realize, oh dang, I kind of missed that opportunity, for deepening into my own life, which, life is very graceful in the sense, right? Opportunities always come back. We're always being initiated into new ways of meeting ourselves and evolving. Life doesn't really leave you behind. But it can be really helpful to reflect on times where you missed out on something simply because you were a little afraid. Because in the position you're in now, you can help other people see where their own hesitation for leaning into their gifts, leaning into their impulses might be costing them, right? My sense is your Venus is very happy. So Venus in Sagittarius loves to explore, loves to have that broader perspective. And for you, this is ruled by Jupiter in Taurus in the third house, right? So there's a quality about this Venusian exploration that's very communal. And I know you as well to be a natural conversationalist. You are genuinely interested in other people's perspective, and you are such an expert at asking questions that are really graceful and also goes deep, right? So perhaps if you would like more people to respond to to what you're putting out there, consider the possibility of adding a little bit more spice here, right? And I want to be very careful here because you do have Mars conjoined Uranus in the ninth house. So the key here is to not actively try to shock other people. Because when we hear, right, okay, I have permission to be a little bit more martial, a little bit more uh pointed in my approach and in how I speak to my audience, sometimes we lean a little too far. Wherever Uranus is, you're already going to bring in that surprise element. So it's not really about stepping too hard into being a provocateur, right? You don't need to do that. Um, but at the same time, can you hold the stance of if people share feedback with you that they are shocked or taken aback, can you practice saying, you're welcome? Because chances are people probably needed that. People who felt shocked by you, your words, your perspective, they probably can use some of that. So, yeah, that's my take on that question. Hopefully, there's something there that can feel nutritive for you. Okay, third question. I am 11th house Taurus Venus and first house Cancer Mars. My challenge seems to be finding satisfaction. It feels like I'm always just short of the right thing, like I'm always longing for something more. Okay, this question is deep because I want you to sit with your definition of what satisfaction is. What does satisfaction mean for you? Because as I'm feeling into this, I feel like reminding you that satisfaction is natural. That as you let go of anything that might be obstructing your life force energy, you will naturally experience satisfaction. Satisfaction isn't something that we have to seek necessarily. So when there's a seeking energy, I then have a couple curiosities that I would kind of like you to feel into or check out, right? Because one possibility could be that your idea of satisfaction is wrapped up in external success, in and specifically external success that isn't truly rooted in a desire that's true for you. So in other words, you might feel like you have to be successful in a specific way that maybe you were taught by your family of origin or by your culture, that you have to want to be successful in a specific way. So that can then lead to this process of or maybe not even process, but like this experience of almost feeling yourself as a hungry ghost, right? You set your eyes towards a particular goal, you move towards it, you reach that goal, right? And then instead of feeling satisfied, you feel kind of hollow. So then you feel like you need to go deeper or further and find the new thing that you can orient towards so that you can find that satisfaction. So if this is the experience that you are speaking to, then advise you, I would encourage you to slow down and really feel into what does true satisfaction feel like for you? Because maybe true satisfaction is found in the smaller and finer things in life. It's not so much about me accomplishing certain things or reaching certain life milestones, but maybe the real satisfaction is that random Sunday morning where you get to just be surrounded by your family and then you hear one of your kids laughing out loud. And that experience can be all that is. That can be the satisfaction you're actually looking for, right? And so, if that's the case, I would encourage you that, first of all, it's still uh, fabulous to have goals, right? I love having goals. I love having goals. I love having projects because isn't that why we're alive? We are alive because we want to continue expanding, right? But maybe the experience you're speaking to potentially is that deep inside you, you are scared of truly letting in the experience of true pleasure. Like when pleasure is actually happening in the moment, when joy is happening in the moment, when love broke your heart a little bit, is there a part of you that's kind of bracing for it? So that's the first thing I would check, right? And um, simultaneously, I also feel like reminding you that expansion is the nature of life. So you live in this three-dimensional form, right? You live in a body, and it's you are nature, right? You don't just nature isn't some destination that we go to that we look at, right? This vista that we take a few paid time off to visit, right? Nature is within ourselves, and nature is always evolving. So, for some reason, for you, when I felt into this question, I got this imagery of a beach and how the shoreline is always in flux, right? Mostly kind of eroded by the ebb and flow of the ocean. So, nature is always expanding, nature is always growing, even if some parts of nature is decaying, right? So if the experience you're speaking to is the experience of you setting a goal and then reaching that goal and then feeling very satisfied, and then that satisfaction kind of fades, right? And it turns into you desiring more things. I would say this is actually kind of healthy because that's a sign that you are still alive, you know? It's not a problem that you always want more. You're here to continue to find new frontiers in your life, right? You're here to continue growing through that tension. I think spirituality, there are certain branches of spirituality that have been really popular maybe in the past 400, 500 years that teach transcendent I can never pronounce this word, but it teaches you to transcend, right? Or teaches you to ascend out of desiring, as if desiring more is a bad thing. But I think that desiring only becomes a problem or becomes the root of suffering when you are unable to detach from the outcome. If desire pulls you towards the new thing that you are resonating with, towards the new direction, and it actually leads you to understanding yourself more, understanding who you are and why you're here more through the act of going towards the new thing, then I would say that desire is a very good thing, right? It's an impetus for growth. So in your chart, I just want to remind you that Venus in Taurus is hungry, right? In fact, Venus in both her domicile in Taurus and in Libra are always hungry. In the mythologies of Venus, Venus is not this like sweet, nice mother who's always loving, always taking care of her children patiently. It's the opposite. Venus is always having these ecstatic love affairs with different lovers. One of them, the most high profile, the most constant in different versions of the myth, of course, is Mars, right? And so it is in Venus's nature to continue wanting more. It is more a question of how you relate to the experience of wanting more. Are you relating to the experience of wanting more from the perspective of I don't have enough, right? Which is really the underlying currency or energy of lack? Or are you orienting to wanting more from a sense of adventurousness? You might want to listen to this song by Björk called Hyper Ballad. She also wrote another song called Venus as a Boy, but I feel like actually Hyper Ballad is a more Venusian anthem. And Hyper Ballad feels to me like is depicting this character who is always hungry for more care, more love, right? More attention, but also has like a propensity for destruction a little bit. Venus is like not a cute archetype, right? Um, I was recently revisiting my mythologies for Venus, and I don't know how many of you know this, but the birth of Venus is very interesting. So, uh, Uranus, which is the god of the sky, right, and uh, his lover, Gaia, which is Earth, kept um, having sex, and then they kept having children, right? But Uranus kept killing the children, and one of the children that Gaia kept, uh, Kronos or Saturn, was finally rebelling against his father, right? So what he did was he cut Uranus's phallus, and then that phallus fell into the middle of the ocean. And Venus was birthed. Aphrodite was birthed from the phallus of uh, Uranus. So the start of Venus's story was already pretty gory, and pretty graphic, right? And it does speak to the Venusian part of us does have that hunger. It is a matter of looking at the rest of your chart for balancing that with part of you that wants to orient towards wisdom, which is what I'm perceiving from you, right? That it, if I were to read between the lines of what you are saying, you seem to have this desire to find balance between seeking satisfaction or seeking pleasure and also um, recognizing that you already have enough, right? Which is the definition of wisdom. And so The last thing that I wanted to bring in here is about your Mars and Cancer. So, Mars in Cancer is very sensitive. Mars in Cancer may struggle with moving on when something is done because Mars in Cancer may feel a kind of indebtedness to help people with their sadness or grief or disappointment when you yourself are maybe done with a specific relationship or a specific project or a specific situation, right? So, my advice for you, if that's true, is to accept what you're feeling. Accept that you are feeling some grief for hurting other people. The experience of hurting people is, especially emotionally, is just a part of life. It's actually neutral, especially if you're not actively trying to hurt them. Um, People will be hurt by your actions, right? If you take actions, no matter which action you take, someone is going to get hurt. And this is the lesson that Mars teaches us, right? That everything has a price. So in your life, I'm sure you have experienced both ends of the spectrum. I'm sure you have experienced being hurt. I'm sure you have also experienced hurting other people. I'm sure that the experience of you being hurt, some of them have accelerated your growth and others have hindered you from actually walking your path, right? So just know that we all have choices in life. And when something unpleasant happens to us, or when we're hurt by someone else's actions, we do have the opportunity to alchemize that into something that's beneficial for us, especially when that person who did something that hurt us is simply advocating for their own interest and their own path, right? That process of separation can be painful, right? When we walk our own individual paths, that can be painful, but that doesn't have to uh, destroy us. And in fact, we can use that to our advantage. So, in case it wasn't clear, the reason why I was bringing this up is because Mars in Cancer can sometimes feel like they have to stay longer in specific situations, even though they're way past being done with it, just because they don't want to hurt other people, just because they themselves are scared of feeling their own feelings when they hurt people. So, if that's part of your experience, just know that that's part of the makeup you are working with, right, through the lens of your birth chart. And the more you can fully accept and nourish the part of you that is grieving, really seeing them, really witnessing them, you will find, I suspect, an easier time leaving things so that you can give yourself permission to move on to the things that actually truly satisfy you. Because you also get to do that in this lifetime. You get to say, okay, the project I was working on was really fun, but now I no longer want to do it and I want to move on to the next thing, right? You get to do that. Okay, next question. Hi, Jonathan. I am navigating lots of fear and insecurity while preparing to share my art more with the world. Mars in Cancer, Venus in Taurus. Well, you have the same placement as the previous question, which I found interesting. And I do have access to your chart. So I took the liberty of looking at your chart. And Venus is very close to the sun. And Venus is an evening star in your chart, right? And I'm bringing this up because the first place I was drawn to was your fifth house because you're speaking about sharing your art more with the world, right? Um, and the ruler of the fifth house in is the sun for you. Actually, let me check one more thing. before I go further. Hmm. And also, so here's the thing. When we're talking about making art, I would place that into the fifth house. And then when it comes to sharing our art, I would kind of place that in the 11th house because the 11th house is the house of dreams and hopes. And it also speaks to the community that we constellate through our shared interests, right? So these are the people who are not just the people who are in your closest vicinity, right? But the people that you actually get to know better and that you allow to get to know you better through the act of you sharing your authentic self, sharing what kind of world you want to see in the world, right? What kind of reality you want to create in this world. And I was also looking at Mars, which is very close to Chiron in your chart in the fourth house. So I have a few thoughts here. The first one is when it comes to sharing your art with the world, just do it. Do it scared, do it with the insecurity. Because what you are stepping into is the next chapter of your evolution as an artist. The first chapter, which it sounds to me like you've mastered, is the chapter where you focus on receiving inspiration and translating that inspiration into form. And the primary skill that is necessary when you're in this chapter is to block out the world. You have to let yourself not even care about what other people want or what other people will think about your work because in that first chapter, your job is to be as true to the inspiration as possible. You want to be isolated, essentially. And the next chapter is you going out there and sharing it with the world, right? And my sense is that you will have to, uh, okay, let me back off here. My sense is that you are ready to go to this next chapter. Otherwise, you wouldn't be asking this question and you wouldn't feel afraid of it. It would just not even cross your mind, right? So a part of you is ready. You are ready to share it. You want, on a deeper soul level, you want the experience of seeing the version of you that gets to share your art. And so perhaps one way to think about this is instead of worrying about the best way to share your art, can you just ask yourself, who am I going to be when I share my art? And then approach the act of sharing your art from the perspective of, ooh, I can't wait to meet this new version of myself, right? Because when you start moving forward with that perspective or that attitude, you will find that opportunities will come up for you to understand where the fear is coming from, right? What are some of your own stories about the worst things that could happen, right? And knowing that you are a Mars in Cancer, some of that fear may be coming from this worry of can I handle it? Can I handle the emotional toll or burden of sharing my art and having people either respond to it or not respond to it, right? So you will want to resource yourself through this process. Do you have people in your life that you can trust to walk alongside you as you are processing this? One of the things that I see a lot of artists being um, grappling with when they're about to share their art is sharing their art with other people will necessarily change their relationship with their art. and with art making in general. And that can be really intense, right? And specifically, with your Mars being conjoined Chiron, I think it might be helpful for you if you have the resources to establish a relationship with some sort of teacher or mentor who can help be a witness and to be a wise shoulder for you to lean on as you are moving through this transition of this chapter that you are leaving and the next chapter you are entering as an artist. And the point, of course, in having a mentor is to cultivate your own relationship with your own inner mentor, right? Um, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. Sharing your art can be extremely scary, especially if in the past your creative expressions have not been received well, whether that be by your caretakers or by people at school, right? Or the community you grew up with. Sometimes it can even be as subtle as you grew up being surrounded by people who don't really value art that much, right? And that can take a toll on you and your confidence as a young artist. And the truth is, when you share your art, it's very likely that people won't understand it because your art is probably very original. Your art likely comes from your truth, from your depths, and the core of who you are, right? And it can take people a long time to catch up with you. Just remember that this is not a problem. Part of being a visionary and being a leader is going in there first, right? You want to go into the woods. Some part of your soul recognizes that there's value in you going into the woods before everybody else says, okay, cool, I want to go there with you, right? And know that there is an art to sharing your art, that sharing your creation has its own skill sets that you are being asked to step into. And similar to the skills that you've had to build and the perspectives you've had to accumulate when you were stepping into the craft aspect of your art, right? Like, for example, I'm thinking if you are a visual artist, if you are a painter, right? Maybe one of the skills you have is learning how to mix colors, right? And this was a skill that you had to learn in order to be able to do your craft. And as you step into sharing your art with other people, you will also need to learn the skills of how to communicate your process, how to communicate about your art that invites people into your art, right? And this is where your Venus and Taurus can be extremely helpful because Venus is at home in Taurus and Venus can access a certain level of um, spaciousness in Taurus, right? So if there's some part of you that is attached to the outcome happening within a specific time frame, I would say really lean upon your Venus in Taurus because she can help you feel more chill about this, right? Um, one last thing I'll share is that it might be helpful for you to notice, are there any rules you have around sharing your art? And I want you to notice what these rules are. For example, maybe you think to yourself, I have to reach a certain milestone. I have to, let me see if I can come up with a good example from my own life as a musician. An example that I can share with you is sometimes in my mind, I feel like my track needs to have a certain level of polish before I can share it with people. And that's a rule, right? And that's a rule that I'm making up in my own head. Nobody else is really uh the truth about rules when it comes to art making and sharing your art is that they're all arbitrary, right? For every rule that you see that applies for a certain person or a certain artist, you will see that there's another artist who is equally successful if not more successful, who completely broke that rule. So there's no universal rule when it comes to art making, right? Or sharing your art. So what I want you to do is notice what some of these rules are in your head and in your body, maybe even. And I want you to find examples where this is true and where this is not. And the reason why you would want to do this is because when you find these examples, it starts to shift your relationship with the rule, right? The rule might be useful. It might be a legitimate rule. And in certain situations or certain contexts. And in other contexts, it might not be. So what you want to do is you want to get to a place where you have healthy relationship with the rules through accumulating examples and counterexamples. And I also then want you to ask yourself, how would my life and my practice be different if this rule were actually not true, right? For me, for example, maybe if I don't have to wait until the production quality is polished before sharing my songs, then maybe I can just share snippets of myself singing my song to a camera without any backing tracks on Instagram, right? Not a big deal. I can just lie on the floor, share my process, and let it be that. I get to share my art in a simple way, right? Um, and finally, the last piece of contemplation is I invite you to break the rule in the next week. What are some small ways that you can break this rule? And then just try it. Mars in Cancer um, is actually a very courageous placement. Some of the most brave people I know are Mars in Cancer. I know that in traditional astrology, it's said that Mars is fallen in Cancer. And the way that I contextualize it is that Mars in Cancer is really sensitive. So Mars in Cancer is so connected to their own feelings, and especially when you have this signature of Mars conjoining Chiron in your chart, you may have had experiences where you weren't fully seen when you were being vulnerable, when you were being sensitive. So you might feel like it's not safe to do that, but I hmm, I think that if you let yourself step out and just share it, you will be surprised by the results that you see. At the very least, you will be surprised by discovering the level of strength and resilience that you have and how that can then be channeled back into your art making. Okay, next question. This is the last one. For me, challenges this year so far have been balancing my need to be alone and in my own world to develop my ideas and contemplate, to develop my ideas and contemplate with spending real time slash quality time with my relationships. Work, same thing. Not enough time to develop ideas before needing to make them at work. Venus is in Aquarius in the fifth house, Mars is in Taurus in the eighth house. Hmm, really great question. So, first of all, I want to invite you to contemplate your relationship with time. If you have to visualize time, what would time look like? If time is a person, how would they dress? What would their aura look like? If time were a color, what color would it be? If time were a place, what would time look like, feel like in your imagination? And once you've felt into that question, I invite you to feel into your body. How does it feel to look at this representation of time? And I want you to ask yourself, is this how I want to relate to time? Or is there a different way that you want to try relating to time? And the reason why I am placing you into this exploration is because my sense is underneath your question is an existential exploration. On the surface, the question looks like a question of finding balance, right? And maybe some part of that is true. Maybe there are tips and tricks you can do in your daily reality that can shift your experience of how that balance feels like. But for you specifically, I wonder if most of it is existential. And how would you know if it's existential? This is how you would know. You continue to have these big visions about what you want to do with your projects, with your work, with your life, with your relationships. And then you might find yourself really struggling to make that a reality. That to me is a symptom that there's something going on here. And what I want to recommend that you do is the practice that I found extremely helpful, which is the practice of killing time. How do you kill time? Going back to my response to the very first question, the present moment is all there is, right? Actually, the past is just a story at this point, and the future is also just science fiction. All you have is right now. So, if we were to kill time, what you want to do is, as much as you want, tune into the big vision, right? And then ask yourself, what can I do now? What can I accomplish now? What feels good now? Start to live in the now. Notice any function within your thought patterns that are making you delay, right? So it would look like something like this. Oh, yeah, it would be really nice to make a short film, but I would have to raise X amount of money to make that happen. I mean, there's some truth to that, but there are also actions you can take now, right? What would feel satisfying to do now? Maybe if let's stick with that example, right? If you want to make a short film and you've never done it in your life, maybe what you do know is how to create a storyboard on Canva, right? So do that. If what you want, if what you think would be nice is to spend time with a friend, right? Or have quality time with a friend, instead of thinking that you have to go on this 3 hour movie date with this friend, what if you just pick up the phone and call them for 10 minutes and say, hey, I have 10 minutes. I've really missed you. I want to hear how you are. Tell me everything, right? And then make that 10-minute window that you have the most present and the most beautiful 10 minutes of your life. Because here's the thing with Venus in Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, right? And so, as we know, Saturn is the principle of constriction. So sometimes when Venus is bound to Saturn, Venus can feel like it needs all these things in order to feel the thing that it wants to feel from doing the thing, right? Like you might want to, in your mind, you might want to take this certification, let's say, right? This year-long somatic training. But actually, perhaps what you want to do, or perhaps how you want to feel, is simply that you want to feel relaxed in your body, right? If what you really want is to feel relaxed in your body, you don't need a year-long training to do that. You just need to sit there on your couch and let yourself melt into your own body, maybe even placing a hand on your body and doing that for 10 minutes. You could feel the feeling, right? So Venus in Aquarius can overcomplicate things. And I know this because I personally have Venus in Aquarius. And I certainly have found that catching myself in moments where I am being too idealistic when it comes to time and when it comes to the experience of um, satisfaction, right? That's another word that's coming up for me. I feel like Venus in Aquarius can um, be so lofty and idealistic in terms of the kinds of satisfaction, the specific kinds of satisfaction that they want to experience. But the bar doesn't have to be set so high all the time, especially if you are mm, not in a phase in your life where there's actually a lot of external spaciousness. So, what I'm hearing from your question, and I could be wrong here, but it kind of sounds to me as I'm reading your question that you are you're feeling like there's not enough time. And maybe that's true. Maybe you are in a chapter in your life where you are being asked to put out a lot, right? And so when you look at your calendar, there may not be as much space. So instead of kind of rebelling against that, what I invite you to do is to work with that, right? Work with the restriction that you have. Let yourself not do it perfectly, but at the same time, don't deny that you have these needs, right? So let me see. Maybe I can share some more practical suggestions here, and you can feel into whether this resonates with you or not. Um, Socially, practice both following your instincts and planning in advance. So doing the both and, right? Um, Follow your instincts by giving yourself permission to cancel appointments when you are in the flow. So if you find yourself waking up and then you are really in the flow of wanting to contemplate your own projects, creating space for yourself, um, developing your ideas, right? And you already made plans with a friend, you might want to practice canceling on them. You can even announce to people ahead of time in your life, hey, I'm practicing following my instincts. Would you be okay with that? Because some friends might be cool with that, other friends might not be cool with that. And that's information, right? You might want to decide to more fully lean upon connections where you know that these people are going to be okay, right? With you canceling last minute. Like they wouldn't feel offended about it. For example, I know he, I know these people exist because I'm one of these people, right? I'm always advocating for my friends to follow their flow. So unless there's other things on the line, like for example, if we made dinner appointments and there's actually a cancellation fee, right? I wouldn't be happy if someone canceled on me last minute, right? Not within that window of time because that's not very thoughtful. However, if it's just us meeting up for coffee and it's very low stakes, right? If someone cancels because they're really in the flow, when it comes to their creative project, I'm so happy for them. Like I'm genuinely so happy for them. And if you have Venus in Aquarius, chances are you're probably kind of like that too. You find it exciting when people communicate with you that they need a little bit of space. You're like, gladly will give it to you, right? Here you go. You're welcome. And so practice letting yourself also ask that of the people in your life. And at the same time, I would also schedule quality time with people way in advance. For some reason, uh, it felt to me like it might be beneficial for you to even consider scheduling a month in advance. So think about, who do I want to actually spend time with? who matters in my life, whose presence and whose energy feel really, really good for me to be around, right? Who am I inspired by? Who do I feel like whenever I hang out with them, my nervous system just relaxes, right? And spend quality time with those people, make plans with them, right? Give yourself permission to really go for it. Venus in Aquarius also loves that, right? Venus in Aquarius loves being committed to things that we know are going to fill our cups. Um, and when it comes to work, especially the experience you were mentioning about feeling like there's not enough time for you to execute the vision that you want at work, one thing you can consider is treating these work projects as iterative, right? So if you only have until, say, next week to come up with your version of it, you can always say, hopefully, if this is the kind of work environment you have, um, you want to be able to say, hey, this is the best I can get it to be, given the time that I have. Can we revisit this later so I can feel the satisfaction of refining it, right? That some ideas might require more time to develop, and my sense of it too is that you are someone who are really tuned in to the potential of a vision, the potential of your ideas, right? You are a visionary. So you value being able to realize and translate your vision well. But know that other people don't see that vision. Other people don't see that vision, right? So they might get something from you and they might be so impressed by your output because they don't have that vision to compare it against, right? Now, I don't want you to feel like, oh, I don't need to fulfill or realize my vision because clearly that matters to you. I want you to still go for it while at the same time also still being able to fulfill your duties and responsibilities and manage expectations with people around you, right? So what you can do around that is yeah, just let people know that you are going to continue iterating when it comes to your projects at work. And chances are most work environments will be really happy about this because they also want you to come up with the best possible outcome, right? So by doing that, you're also benefiting them. The last thing that I want to say is that Pluto has been co-present with your Venus because Pluto entered Aquarius solidly at the start of 2025. And Pluto is the ruler of the underworld, right? So the underworld is very different in astrology versus in kind of conventional Christianity, right? The underworld is not hell. The underworld is actually the place where we don't always have access to light. The underworld is a place that can feel more empty than the above world. The underworld can feel slower. It moves at a different pace, right? If we think about the cave, um, the cave is more quiet, right, than the meadow, for example, or the forest even, because it's protected. The underworld is like yeah, it's like in the belly of the earth, right? And so Pluto entering the house where our Venus is can feel like things are a little bit less clear. Things are feeling a little bit mm, like it kind of loses its color. I wonder if you have seen that TV show called Chaos, which is the modern um, depiction of the Greek gods. And in Chaos, the underworld is black and white, is depicted as this realm that is completely black and white, right? So if you feel like what used to make you really happy and really satisfied and really joyous is kind of feeling a little bit lukewarm, that could be Pluto's influence as well, right? So don't beat yourself up. You're not doing anything wrong if that's part of your experience. And just trust that you get to exercise your power in relationships and in your creative projects, right? Um, I'll speak to a part of your experience that might be there, or a potential part of your experience that I haven't spoken to, which is it is possible that you are just really stretched at this time in your life. You just have a lot going on, right? And you might be craving more alone time. You know, Venus and Aquarius people can be so brilliant, so thoughtful, so considerate, which is why you are so beloved and trusted, and people really want to be around you. But you also might have need for spaciousness and need for rest and recuperation that is a little bit more than people around you, right? Um, Venus and Aquarius people need to be able to shut the door on people and announce, hey, I'm going to the top of the mountain and I'm going to be unreachable for a while, right? Venus and Aquarius people need to be able to go on airplane mode. And I would say Mars and Taurus does too. Mars and Taurus needs to be able to work on things slowly. And so, um, in areas of your life where you are able to calibrate your sense of time, on top of you practicing killing time, I would also invite you to consider the possibility that you just might want to give yourself permission for more spaciousness because you get to have that too. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much for all of you who have asked these questions. They are so brilliant. I have so much fun answering them. And yeah, I think if those of you listening would like to ask more questions if anything's coming up from the responses that I'm sharing today, I invite you to subscribe to my Substack. And you can be a free subscriber or a paying subscriber if you want to support this work. I would absolutely be grateful and I would love to have you support the work financially. But if not, just know that the subscriber chat is also open for those of you who subscribe without um, paying. So you will have access to that. You can ask your question there, and I will get to it when I get to it the next time. And if any of you listen to this and you are like, wow, this sounds so fun. I want to do this work for 3 months with Jonathan and look at Venus and Mars, look at our placements and play with different energy work and, get these kind of customized prompts and by customize, I mean customize to the group prompts of how to work with Venus and Mars in our own lives and our embodied experiences, I would invite you to join us. And we start on March 2nd, which is next week. We meet twice a week, which sounds like a lot, but actually, I think it will be really fun because each meetup is really only an hour. So it kind of feels like this fun hour where we get to uh, do some meditation, do some practices. I'll share more about my archetypal studies when it comes to Mars and Venus. We'll look at people's charts, as I mentioned. We'll have really juicy conversations. And yeah, if that sounds fun, sign up for the immersion. Okay, I think that's it. I look forward to gathering again with all of you very soon, and I hope you take good care of yourself. I'm sending you so much love, and that's it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.